The Story of Hermione by Cyril Hare. When Richard Armstrong, explorer and mountaineer, disappeared in a blizzard in the Karakoram, his only daughter Hermione was just turned 20. He bequeathed her a good deal of unusual experience gathered in remote parts of the world, but very little else. For more tangible aids to living, she had to look to her uncle Paul, who was in a position to supply them on a very lavish scale. Paul Armstrong had confined his explorations to the square mile of the earth's surface lying east of Temple Bar, and he had found them extremely fruitful. Hermione was a slender, fragile creature, with observant blue eyes, a determined chin, and a small mouth that remained closed unless speech was absolutely necessary. She gave her uncle and aunt no sort of trouble, submitted quietly to the horseplay which passed for humour with her tall, athletic cousins Johnny and Susan, and kept her own counsel. In that cheerful, noisy household she passed almost unobserved. In the following winter Susan Armstrong was killed by a fall in the hunting field. 6 months later, Johnny, playing a ridiculous game of leapfrog with Hermione on the springboard of his parents' swimming bath, slipped, crashed into the side of a bath, and broke his neck. Paul and his wife had worshipped their children with uncritical adoration. A double blow deprived them of all motive for living, and when shortly afterwards they fell victims to an influenza epidemic, they made not the slightest resistance. Even with death duties at their present level, Hermione was a considerable heiress. With the calm deliberation that had always characterized her, she set out to look for a husband suitable to her station in life. After carefully considering the many applicants for the post, she finally selected Freddie Fitzhugh. It was an altogether admirable choice. Freddie was well-to-do, well-connected, good-looking, and no fool. Their courtship was unexciting, but satisfactory. The engagement was announced, and on a fine spring morning they went together to Bond Street to choose a ring. Freddie took her to Garland's, those aristocrats among jewellers, and the great Mr. Garland himself received them in his private room behind the shop. Hermione examined the gems which he showed her with dispassionate care, and discussed them with an expertise that astonished Freddie as much as it delighted Mr. Garland. She ended by choosing a diamond as superior to the rest as Freddie had been to his rival suitors, and they took their leave. Meanwhile the shop outside had not been idle. Shortly after the door of Mr. Garland's private room had closed, 2 thick-set men entered and asked the assistant at the counter to show them some diamond bracelets. They proved to be almost as difficult to please as Hermione, without displaying her knowledge of precious stones, and before long there were some thousands of pounds worth of brilliants on the counter for their inspection. To the bored assistant it began to seem as though they would never come to a decision. But then, just as Mr. Garland was bowing Freddie and Hermione out of the shop, everything began to happen at once. A large saloon car slowed down in the street outside and paused with its engine running. At the same moment one of the men with lightning speed scooped up 6 bracelets and made for the door, while his companion sent the doorkeeper flying with a vicious blow to the stomach. Freddie, who'd stopped to exchange a few words with Mr. Garland, looked round and saw, to his horror, that Hermione was standing alone in front of the doorway, directly in the path of the man. She made no attempt to avoid him as he bore down upon her. It flashed across Freddie's mind that she was too paralyzed by fear to move. Hopelessly he started to run forward as the man crashed an enormous fist into Hermione's face. The blow never reached its mark. With a faintly superior smile, Hermione shifted her position slightly at the last moment. An instant later the raider was flying through the air to land with a splintering of glass head first against the showcase. The whole affair had occupied a few seconds of time. "You never told me you could do jiu-jitsu, Hermione," said Freddie, when they eventually left the shop. "Judo. My father had me taught by an expert. It does come in handy sometimes. Of course, I'm rather out of practice." "I see. You know, Hermione, there are quite a few things about you I don't know." They parted. Hermione had an appointment with her hairdresser, and Freddie went for a quiet stroll in the park. Then he took a taxi to Fleet Street, where he spent most of the afternoon browsing in the files of various newspapers. They met again at dinner that evening, and Freddie came straight to the point. "I've been looking at the reports of the inquest on your cousin Johnny." "Yes?" "It was very odd the way he shot off the springboard onto the edge of a bath." "How exactly did it happen?" "I explained it all to the coroner. I just happened to move at the critical moment, and he cannoned off me." "Hard luck on Johnny." "Very." "Hard luck on that chap this morning that you just happened to move at the critical moment. I don't think you told the coroner you could do this judo stuff." "Well, of course not." "Hard luck on Susan, too, taking that fall out hunting." "That was pure accident. I told her she couldn't hold the horse." Freddie sighed. "I'll have to give you the benefit of the doubt over that one. But I'm afraid the engagement's off." Hermione looked at the diamond on her finger and screwed her hand into a tight little fist. "Really? Well, that's very sudden. I can't stop you breaking it off, of course, Freddie. But you will find it rather expensive." He did. Very expensive indeed. But he thought it well worth the money. It seemed, around Hermione, one just couldn't be too careful. And as has been said, Freddie was no fool.
It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you,